The Navajo Nation is recognized in 150 years of its treaty with the United States this year. Navajo leaders signed the treaty in 1868, which ensured their people's return home from incarceration in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, to their traditional homelands. The agreement also created the framework for the nation-to-nation relationship with the federal government. Tribal events commemorated the signing, including a 400-mile run from Fort Sumner to Window Rock, Arizona, to trace the steps of the Diné people's return home. Correspondent Antonia Gonzalez spoke recently with the Vice President of the Navajo Nation about the significance of the treaty.
And joining us today is Vice President Jonathan Nez. Thank you for being in studio with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So the 2018, the Navajo Nation declared the year of the treaty to tell the history of the treaty signing. Many Navajo people suffered. Many didn't make it home back to their homelands. Can you tell us a little bit about how the treaty events are retelling history from the Native perspective?
Absolutely. You know, we are commemorating 150 years since the signing of that treaty, and what we're wanting to magnify throughout the Navajo Nation is the resilience of our Native people. And that's just not Navajo, it's all indigenous people throughout the world, and in this case in the Southwest. And it's really a story about overcoming, as a people, overcoming tough times. And as many of our people know, and those that have read about the long walk of the Navajo, we've gone through a tough period during the westward expansion, the United States, America's growth, and the times of, I guess you could say, manifest destiny, and the land grab that had occurred. And for the Navajo people, you know, we were living in harmony with the land during 150 plus years ago, and the folks coming from the east, you know, wanted to move all the way to the Pacific Ocean in search of land and wealth. But little do many of us know in the United States is that indigenous people were living here on the United States soil prior to that westward expansion. And you would think it would be just a straight course to Fort Sumner, but no, he went kind of up from Albuquerque and up north into Santa Fe. And you know, there are stories that say that the reason why they did that was just to let folks know that the great Navajo people were taken into captivity, kind of paraded through these communities, and taken to Fort Sumner. And I guess we were just being used, shown as an example. If you go against the great U.S. government, this could happen to you. 150 years later, with the commemoration that the Navajo Nation is doing, is we're telling the story from the signing of the Treaty of 1868 to today. And not many of our people know that story. And to magnify resilience and overcoming tough time is that message that we want to reinstill into our young people, because it's no secret that in tribal communities, you know, we have high levels of alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, suicide. But I truly believe, as the Vice President of the Navajo Nation, that if we can open that door to have a discussion about our history from our own lens, I think it can reinstill hope and a message to our young people about not giving up, that resilience.
You mentioned the history was the 400 miles. Mm-hmm. There was a run that took place as part of you took part in that. Your shoes were up at the treaty yes. When the treaty was shown for a month in Window Rock this summer. Your shoes were also there, along with the Navajo Nation flag, where runners retraced ancestors' steps, and talking about a lot of issues that tribes face today, including the Navajo Nation. Your role model, part of health and wellness, is one of the things that you try to incorporate. So how was that talk a little bit about health and wellness when it comes to Navajo people and with the treaty event.
I think with the run that we did in commemorating our 150 years was very extraordinary, because we went through the same route, we followed the same route as our ancestors took back 150 years later, but there was a different atmosphere this time around. People were opening their doors to the runners. We were praying with the folks along the route. People were feeding us and cheering us on as we were running through many of the communities that our ancestors took back. And it was just a whole 180-degree change in attitude, where now it was a moment of reconciliation, if you say, a moment of healing for all people. And again, this is just not for the Navajo people, it's not just for the people in New Mexico, but it was for all people in the Southwest. And to see that mankind, human beings, five-fingered beings, can come back together and forgive one another. As we ran through these communities, we said, okay, it is time to come back together again. We understand that happened, but maybe
And
it is a
looking
time
at the healing.
Healing and forgiveness, and we cried together. A lot of non-native folks along the way. Again, we prayed together. We also ran together. We had even our sheriff's deputies along the way running right alongside us, and it was an emotional event for many of us. And we weren't reenacting anything. We were just commemorating
along the trail
and honoring our ancestors, and also recognizing that we need to take better care of ourselves. Running is an intricate part of who we are, and that's an intricate part of health and wellness. And when we say health and wellness, it's not just about eating right or exercising. It's a holistic approach to health and wellness, which is also prayers and knowing who we are as Indigenous people. And in our commemoration is just knowing and being proud of being as Navajo. And as we went into cities like in Santa Fe, people were honking their horns and shaking our hands and giving us the key to their communities, and churches along the way opening their doors. And we started off with one of our Navajo Nation flags from Fort Sumner, the village of Fort Sumner, and we thought it would be memorable for many of the folks along the way who signed the flag, and we took that flag all the way 400 plus miles, and that's what you saw at the museum, including my shoes.
Yeah.
My shoes took a beating, as you probably noticed, but over 400 miles all the way back, a lot of the runners bonded together. And when I say bonded together, it just also gave us a glimpse of what our ancestors went through as they went back to. We became a family, a group of runners, and seeing each other every day and cheering each other on. Sometimes some of us, we were tired, and we felt like we couldn't go any further. But we said, we'll help each other out. Maybe, take a breather, but we'll just keep going. And it just kind of gave us that insight of what our ancestors went through. I'm sure it was the same way. But as we came into Albuquerque, that was special. When we went down the Tejeras, and then we looked and we saw Mount Taylor. And that was probably one of the first times the Navajo people as well, back 150 years ago, saw one of their sacred mountains in the distance. And we cried as we saw that. And we were gone for days, and we saw that, and we just thought about what our ancestors back then, to see their sacred mountain in the distance, and they knowing that they're almost home.
Well, there's a lot of history and talk about resilience that you were saying with a few thousand Navajo people who made it home to more than 300,000 Navajos today, and a lot of resiliency continuing today. And we appreciate you coming in and speaking with us and sharing a little bit about the treaty events. And thank you so much for your time today.
All right, thank you.